Hello, a very good afternoon and welcome to the News International edition on this 27th day of March 2023. We are coming to you live from our Vision Group headquarters here in Kampala, Uganda. I'm Emma Akwero. Our top story, police has fired tear gas to disperse anti-government protesters across Kenya over the high cost of living. The opposition has vowed demonstrations would go ahead despite a police ban. President William Samoei Ruto is on a trip to Germany and Belgium, from where he's still urging Azimio leader Raila Odinga to hold the action.
Nairobi woke up to tight security with riot police stationed at strategic points in the capital and patrolling the streets, while many shops were shut and train services from the capital's outskirts into the central business district were suspended. Veteran opposition leader Raila Odinga has urged people to take to the streets every Monday and Thursday, even after protests a week ago turned violent and paralyzed parts of Nairobi. Police clashed with stone-throwing demonstrators in Nairobi's largest slum, Kibera, where protesters set tires on fire, defying a warning by the Inspector General of Police, Japhet Koome, who said on Sunday that the rallies are illegal. The situation was calmer elsewhere in the city, with a heavy police presence in neighborhoods where protests had taken place last week. During last Monday's clashes in Nairobi and opposition strongholds in western Kenya, a university student was killed by police fire, while 31 officers were injured as running battles erupted between riot police and demonstrators. More than 200 people were arrested, including several senior opposition politicians, while protesters as well as Odinga's own motorcade were hit with tear gas and water cannon. It was the first major outbreak of political unrest since President William Ruto took office more than 6 months ago after defeating Odinga in an election his rival claims was stolen. Despite the police ban, Odinga has called on Kenyans to join what he has described as the mother of all demonstrations. Odinga also accuses Deputy President Rigathi Gachagua of orchestrating an operation to cause mayhem at Monday's rallies. The Communications Authority of Kenya has sought to prevent television stations from broadcasting the demonstrations live, but the move was blocked by the High Court. Ruto, who is currently on a 4-day trip to Germany and Belgium, has urged his rival to halt the action. Many Kenyans are struggling to put food on the table, battling high prices for basic goods, as well as a plunging local currency and a record drought that has left millions hungry. During the election campaign, Ruto portrayed himself as champion of the downtrodden and vowed to improve the livelihood of ordinary Kenyans. But critics say he has broken several campaign promises and has removed subsidies for fuel and maize flour, a dietary staple. Kenya's energy regulatory body has also announced a hike in electricity prices from April, despite Ruto insisting in January there would be no such increase. Last week's protests proved costly, with Gachagua saying the country had lost at least $15 million.
Israeli protesters are calling on Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's hard-right government to hold its judicial reform program, adding that Israel has become a very dangerous place to live in. Netanyahu's government is facing more protests and calls for a general strike against its controversial push to overhaul the judicial system. The new legislation will give more powers to politicians and reduce the role of the Supreme Court.
To be honest, it's incredible. I can't believe what's going on in Israel. It's just madness. It's complete madness. All the authorities, all the people that have from all the jurisdictions, from the militaries, from the financial sectors, from all the sectors in Israel, saying that this reform or whatever you call it, it is completely crazy, and Israel has become a very dangerous place to be in at the moment.
I think everyone must go on strike today, all the sectors of the economy. We call on the government to stop this crazy reform. We want equality, a constitution, and a declaration of human rights.
Israeli Prime Minister has fired the Defense Minister Yoav Gallant a day after he called to hold the controversial judicial reforms, citing security concerns. Benjamin Netanyahu is expected to address the nation today amid speculation he could pause the reforms. Meanwhile, the protests still continue across the country.
Protesters are mounting pressure on Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu to make a U-turn on the judicial reforms. Israel's top trade unionists called for a general strike on Monday over the hard-right government's controversial judicial reforms, a day after Netanyahu sacked his defense minister and staunch ally Yoav Gallant, who had called for a stop to the overhaul. In recent days and weeks, during conversations and discussions behind the scenes, I presented the security situation to various parties. I asked, reasoned, and said that at this time the process must be stopped so that we may sit and talk. Netanyahu is expected to address the nation later on Monday, with speculation in Israeli media that he could pause the judicial reforms. The plan to hand more control to politicians and diminish the role of the Supreme Court has ignited months of protests and sparked concern from Israel's top allies, including the United States. Netanyahu's government argues the changes are needed to rebalance powers between lawmakers and the judiciary. Lawmakers are scheduled to vote this week on a central part of the proposals, which would change the way judges are appointed. Moments after Netanyahu sacked Gallant, demonstrators seized the central highway in the coastal city of Tel Aviv, blocking traffic and burning tires. After months of rallies, including a weekend demonstration that brought out an estimated 200,000 people in Tel Aviv, protesters in the city say it felt like a sort of climax. In Jerusalem, demonstrators gathered on Sunday outside the Prime Minister's residence, while others rallied in the northern city of Haifa and Beersheba in the south. The activist movement has announced a national paralysis week, including protests outside ministers' homes and parliament. The United States says it is deeply concerned and is calling on Israeli leaders to reach a compromise. Gallant, a former general, was named to his post in December as part of Netanyahu's coalition with extreme right and ultra-Orthodox allies. Some lawmakers have raised questions over whether the government could count on a majority if it pushes ahead with the vote. Opposition leader Yair Lapid says that while the Prime Minister has sacked Gallant, he cannot fire reality or the people of Israel who are standing up to the coalition. A parliamentary committee has amended the draft law to make it more accessible to opponents, but the opposition has ruled out backing any part of the reform package until all legislative steps are halted. Netanyahu is on trial over charges of bribery, fraud, and breach of trust, which he denies.
Israelis are increasingly seeking security in guns, fearful of surging violence in the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. More people are acquiring firearms licenses in preparation for defense. The aftermath of the conflict has seen a wave of knife attacks against Israelis and violent riots in mixed Jewish Arab towns in Israel.
Pistol shots ring out and carbide lingers in the air at this gun range of an Israeli settlement in the occupied West Bank as Tomer Gal completes the final stage of his firearms license assessment. Like many Israelis increasingly fearful of surging violence in the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, Gal decided to get a gun license, a lengthy process that National Security Minister Itamar Ben-Gvir has sought to rapidly fast-track. Gal, whose employees include Palestinians from the West Bank, works on construction sites in Israel, which he says is not safe. I work at construction sites, which are all in all not the safest places. You hear all kinds of stories about friction among the population. The pistol is mainly for my own security, but also for my household's security. While he began his application over a year ago, His visit to the Givat Ziv settlement's shooting gallery came weeks after the deadliest gun attack on Israeli civilians in more than a decade. It was mainly pressure from my wife to get a handgun. She really felt insecure. I began the application process a long time ago, around a year ago, but it was mainly due to her pressure and feeling of insecurity. I lived relatively okay without a handgun. On January 27th, a Palestinian shot dead 7 people outside a synagogue before being killed by police in the Jewish settlement of Neve Yaakov in annexed East Jerusalem. Israel's police commissioner responded to the attack by calling on those eligible to carry a firearm to do so. And in the days that followed, Ben-Gvir, head of the extreme-right Jewish Power Party, said he would speed up licensing.
אחרי התקיפה בנווה יעקב, ההתקפה האחרונה, אכן, יש שוב פעם, בדיוק כמו שומר חומות, עלייה.
Indeed, after the Neve Yaakov synagogue attack, there is again, just like after Guardian of the Walls, a very high rise in gun purchases, or even questions and phone calls on how to get a license, or people who had a gun permit that they didn't use until now, and now they put it into effect. So yes, in the last weeks there's been a rise.
עכשיו באים לממש את האישורים שלהם. כן, יש. בשבועיים האחרונים יש עלייה.
At the time, more than 17,000 applications were still being processed. Former military officers were exempted from requiring an interview as part of the process, a temporary measure expiring in May. Attacks and security incidents traditionally increase interest in gun licenses. The Israeli authorities' plan to further arm the population has sparked concern in some quarters. Under current laws, prospective owners must either live or work in the West Bank settlements or undertake a job exposed to potential danger or friction with Palestinians.
קצינים אנשי ביטחון או אנשים שגרים מעבר לקו הירוק או אנשים שעובדים ב-90% או 100% עבודה מעבר לקו הירוק. רק זה התנאי שאזרח יכול לקבל במדינת ישראל.
We don't have a police officer for each and every civilian in Israel. So if you have the option to take a gun only for your self-defense and obviously that of your fellow civilian, that's fine. People woke up and came to their senses a bit after Guardian of the Walls, the 2021 conflicts. Even those who didn't want to own a gun realized they needed one. A lot of people don't want to own a gun, but they need one. What can we do? We are not in Switzerland.
לא שיהיה להם. אז קצת אנשים אחרי שומר החומות התעוררו, התעשתו, גם מי שלא רצה, הבין שהוא כן צריך. הרבה אנשים לא רוצים, אבל צריכים, מה לעשות? צריכים. אנחנו לא בשוויץ, אמרתי את זה כבר.
Applicants undergo police and medical screenings, followed by an interview at the National Security Ministry's Firearms Licensing Department. Only then can they purchase a gun, complete training, and then finally get a license. Girls' decision to buy a firearm came around a year ago, following an 11-day war in May 2021 between Israel and Hamas militants in the coastal Gaza Strip. The aftermath of the conflict saw a spate of knife attacks against Israelis and violent riots in mixed Jewish-Arab towns in Israel.
The News International edition will now take a short break, but please stay with us.